so. Welcome to today's webinar, Using Customs Special Procedures to Simplify and Facilitate Trade. My name is Anne White. I am Head of International Trade at the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, the accredited chamber for Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Swindon and Heathrow. We offer a wide variety of international trade services, specialist services for members and non-member companies. Before I hand over to today's session to our speaker, I'd like to say that today's session is actually being recorded. The recording of the webinar will be available on the Thames Valley Chamber.co.uk website. Thank you for those that have put comments and questions already, but if you wish to raise a question or a comment, please do so using the Q&A facility, or some of you I know like to use the chat facility. We will endeavour to cover the questions during the session, but if not, we will come back to you at a later date. So today's webinar, the UK's exit from the EU has meant that many more traders face a variety of complex customs obligations when trading with EU countries. However, the use of customs special procedures and authorisations can allow a trader to streamline some and facilitate these new requirements, leading to greater efficiency and effective trading. This webinar will give insight into the benefits of some of the special procedures and authorisations. Today's presenter is Barbara Scott, the owner and manager of our customs partner here at the Chamber, Customs Associates Limited. Barbara has a wealth of knowledge about customs and international trade and is a current chair of the Customs Practitioners Group. Barbara is also a customs advisor to the UK Warehousing Association and Giftware and Toy Trade. Barbara works with a number of associates advising on excise duty, customs systems, litigation and related matters. Customs Associates has a number of customs and international trade advisors in most major trading countries. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Anne. Hopefully you can all hear me clearly now. Sorry about that. So today, yes, we're going to talk about three things really. Simplified procedures, which facilitate the making of customs declarations. For imports, that's the procedure called Customs Freight Simplified Procedures, and otherwise known as CFSP. In the customs world, you've probably all realised now that we do have our own strange language and lots of acronyms. I will try to use the correct terminology for the words and explain what I'm talking about. There are also simplified procedures to make export declarations as well. Also going to talk about special procedures which mitigate duty costs. And also I'm going to mention very briefly at the end the authorised economic operator system. So simplified procedures. If we use customs freight simplified procedures, the idea is that you make a simplified frontier declaration rather than having to make a full customs declaration before the goods arrive. The simple declaration made at the border is then followed up with a full supplementary declaration by the fourth working day of the following month. Now that's the traditional customs freight simplified procedure system that we've had operating for many years. But for the EU imports this year, it was a temporary arrangement until the end of this month, but it has actually been extended to the end of the year now. Traders can make delayed declarations for EU imports. Now, the delayed declaration system still requires us to use customs freight simplified procedures, but it doesn't require a frontier declaration. So this means the idea of this is that goods can flow quickly through the ports at import, so that there's no declaration, no simplified declaration being made when the goods arrive. Particularly useful, obviously, for fast freight coming in through the east ports. So there's no frontier declaration, but the trader must use entry in declarants records. So if you have chosen to delay your import declarations for EU imports this year, hopefully either you or your agent is using entry in declarants records. And then the supplementary declaration must be made within 175 days. So this is just for EU imports. I'm going to quickly just go ahead in the presentation a moment and look at EU imports and what entry in declarants records means. It means that you must prepare all this information that I've listed on this slide and hold this information so that you can make the supplementary declaration, or someone who is authorised for customs freight simplified procedures to make this declaration on your behalf after the goods have arrived within that 175 days. So there's a lot of information that's required about when the goods arrive, what they are, what the commodity codes are, the weight, the description of the goods, and the customs value of the goods. And you must also estimate the amount of VAT that's payable on the import, on the arrival of the goods, so that you can account for it in your next VAT return. It's because of all that information that's required that many people have decided instead to make a full customs declaration before the goods arrive. But if you use a full CFSP procedure, you can actually make the supplementary declaration at any time. And as I say, for non-EU imports, that must be by the 4th working day of the following month. Customs freight simplified procedures requires the use of a duty deferment account. Because the goods have been imported and the declaration hasn't been made in full at the port, when it is made by the 4th working day of the following month, or for EU imports, the supplementary declaration is made within 175 days. The duty, and if you were to pay import VAT and not use postponed VAT accounting, if you were paying the import VAT, that could also be deferred. But there must be a duty deferment account to use simplified procedures. If you wanted to apply to have your own customs freight simplified procedures authorisation, which does require specialist software and a lot of training into how to make your declarations. But of course, if you can make your own declarations, there's an extreme cost saving because you're not paying a third party to do it on your behalf. And you also have control. You're not reliant on a third party to make customs declarations. You can ensure that the declarations are correct in real time. So it's a procedure that, as well as freight companies, some importers do use. It requires an application on form C&E 48 and a questionnaire. I believe the questionnaire is now being integrated with the application form. So CFSP for imports is quite complex, but less complex is the simplified export procedure. Again, with exports, a full declaration can be made before the goods leave the country, or we can use a two-part simplified procedure whereby a declaration is made before the goods leave your premises. That's called the pre-shipment declaration. It does require, unlike a simplified frontier declaration, the simplified export initial declaration does require quite a lot of the information that is required in a full export declaration. But again, it enables a company to do it themselves and not rely on a third party. So you make the pre-shipment declaration, and when that goes into the HMRC system, you are then given permission to progress, permission to take the goods to the port for export. When the goods arrive at the port, obviously by the transporter, they will, what we call, present the goods at the port by arriving them in the customs system. So they let the customs system know that the goods have arrived, and they will be given by customs permission to load the goods for export. After that, a supplementary declaration to say that the goods were exported and provide any additional information required is made within 14 days. Now, simplified export declarations do not require specialist software and are a lot easier for companies to do if they have a lot of exports and want to have control of their export declarations. That's all I'm going to say about declarations. Obviously, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll move on now. Before I move on, just to tell you again that to apply for simplified export declarations, it's the same application form. That's CNE 48. But moving on to special procedures to help you make duty savings on goods imported. There are various special procedures. Inward processing relief, which is a duty relief on goods that are imported for processing and will be re-exported. It saves the duty on goods imported if they are re-exported. Outward processing relief, if you're sending goods overseas for processing and then bringing them back, you don't want to pay the full duty on the goods coming back, so you would apply for outward processing relief. There's a special procedure called authorised use. I'm not going to talk about that today because it is very specific for particular businesses, such as if you were making prawn sandwiches, you could have authorised use to reduce the duty payable on the prawns, or if you were manufacturing cars, you would also use authorised use. So it's very specific, and I'm sure if you're in that industry, you would know something about it. Customs warehousing. We're also going to talk about customs warehousing this morning, which enables you to import goods and store them duty-free. Now, these special procedures are all controlled by customs procedure codes. When you import goods, box 37 of the import declaration is the customs procedure code. And that tells customs what procedure you're going to use for the goods. So if you're just importing goods and paying the duty, you would declare the customs procedure code 40000000. Some people call it code 4 million, as the CPC to say these goods are just being imported, end of story, I'm paying the duty and accounting for the VAT on them. But if you wanted to use inward processing relief, outward processing relief, authorised use, customs warehousing, or a myriad of other special nuances, you would use different customs procedure codes. I'm going to mention those a bit more as we go on. So inward processing relief. Inward processing relief suspends duty and VAT on goods imported for processing. So particularly useful if you're bringing goods in now from the EU, processing them and re-exporting them, distributing them throughout the EU. A lot of companies have now applied for inward processing relief. But what is processing? Processing can be anything from the manufacture of a car down to anything as simple as repacking goods and preparing them for distribution and resale. IPR is also inward processing relief, often referred to as IPR or sometimes just IP, because IPR has its own meaning as intellectual property rights. So in customs, we refer to it as IP. IP is often needed to import goods for repair and re-export. This is because you don't want to pay duty on the goods coming in if you're going to re-export them. But also because if you are importing somebody else's goods for repair and re-export, if you paid the import VAT, or even if you accounted for it, as you are not the owner of the goods, you could not recover that VAT. So you must have inward processing relief, or otherwise you're going to pay 20% import VAT on the goods for repair, which you can't recover. So it's particularly important relief for goods imported for repair and re-export. Most important thing about inward processing relief is that it's only available for goods that are being processed. It's not a facility that allows you to import goods, process them, and put them on the shelf. You must import the goods, process them, and then inform customs that you have re-exported them, or that you're going to keep them in the UK and you now need to pay the duty and account for the VAT on them. So the time for processing is called the throughput period. So a major part of your authorisation process will be determining the time that you need for processing, because that's the time that customs will allow you to import the goods and hold them in duty suspension. Goods not re-exported must obviously be, a customs declaration must be made to move them from inward processing relief to free circulation, and the duty must be paid. So there's two ways of approval for inward processing relief. There's a simplified declaration, a simplified authorisation, called authorisation by declaration, which is made when the goods arrive. It doesn't require any pre-approval by HMRC. It requires, however, for the duty and VAT that's payable on the goods to be deposited. And this will then be repaid when the goods, when you provide evidence that the goods have been re-exported. A simplified authorisation allows 6 months from import to re-export. So it enables goods to be held for the throughput period of 6 months. Once you've exported them, you must complete, as well as exporting them using the correct customs procedure codes. You import the goods using a particular customs procedure code and export them under another customs procedure code. Once that's been done, you can then fill in what we call the bill of discharge and send that into HMRC, and at that point they will return your security. But the unfortunate thing about the simplified authorisation, authorisation by declaration, is that you can only use it 3 times a year. So if you're regularly importing goods for processing and re-export, you cannot use a simplified authorization. You can, but once you've had your 3 goes at it, you need to get a full authorization. It also can't be used for large items, goods over £500,000. So even if you're just going to import your yacht once a year for repair, you would need a full inward processing relief authorization. So for a full authorization, unlike the simplified authorization, because customs have all the information and they've approved you in advance, generally a security is not required. So the customs, the CCG that was required when we were part of the EU is generally not required. It would be required if customs were concerned that the applicant might not fulfill the terms of their authorization. But generally, a guarantee is no longer required. The application is made through the government gateway, so there's no actual particular form, but additionally you must complete a questionnaire, and it's the questionnaire that actually has all the details. It's called a self-assessment questionnaire. So you self-assess that you are able to comply with all the requirements of the inward processing relief. You must provide evidence of how long you're going to take to process the goods, what your throughput period will be. So if you're importing goods and simply repackaging them, then you're not going to have a very long, what we call period of discharge or throughput period. Obviously, if you're importing goods to manufacture an aircraft part or something, then that's going to take a lot longer and you're going to have a much longer period of discharge. Once you've submitted your application and your questionnaire and all the information is there for customs to review, you should receive an approval within 30 days. You will undoubtedly have a few questions from HMRC because there'll be things in your application and questionnaire that they will want to clarify before they give you the approval. And of course, once you've got that approval, it's very important that you make sure you comply with the terms of your authorization, complete the quarterly returns, and make sure that goods not re-exported are put into free circulation and the duty is paid. Outward processing relief. So outward processing relief is the opposite of inward processing relief. This is where you're sending goods overseas for processing and re-importing. What a lot of people don't realise is that if you do that, if you do not have outward processing relief and you send, for example, fabric abroad for making up into clothing and re-importing, and you re-import the clothing, the duty is payable on the full value of that clothing, even though you sent out the fabric to be processed. Now, this is where outward processing comes in, because if you have an outward processing authorization, when you re-import the fabric as clothing, duty is only payable on the processing costs and the shipping costs to bring the goods back to the UK. But without OPR, you would have to pay duty on that fabric as well as the processing costs. The most important thing about OPR is to make sure that you are able to evidence that the goods going out are the same goods that come back. So, for example, with that fabric I mentioned, you would have to show the rate of yield and explain what processing records were going to be kept. Now, obviously, the processing records are predominantly kept overseas, by the processor. So you would need to have evidence, you would need to discuss with him what evidence he can provide you so that you can make sure that the goods being returned are made from the, in my example, the clothing being returned is made from the fabric that you sent him. I guess you would want that for your own records anyway. When the goods are re-imported, when my example, the clothing is re-imported, you must evidence the export of the original fabric. And as I say, you declare the full value of the goods being imported, and you deduct from it, from the value of the goods that you're importing, the value of the item that you exported, so that duty is only payable on the difference, the process cost. Again, for outward processing relief, there's an application form on the government gateway, and you'll also be required to submit a questionnaire, self-assessment questionnaire. So moving on to the third and last special procedure that I'm going to discuss this morning, customs warehousing. There are two types of customs warehouse, a public and a private customs warehouse. A private customs warehouse is usually a company's own warehouse where they keep their own goods, whereas a public warehouse is usually run by a third party who will be holding goods on behalf of various customers. And the difference is the responsibilities as far as customs are concerned, because there's the holder of the authorization, the person who has the customs warehouse authorization is known as the holder of the authorization. And then there's also the holder of the procedure, the person who puts the goods into the customs warehouse. Now, with a private customs warehouse, the holder of the authorization and the holder of the procedure are the same. But in a public customs warehouse, they're different. In a public customs warehouse, both the holder of the authorization and the person depositing the goods in the customs warehouse are jointly and severally liable for making sure that the goods are properly declared to customs and controlled. So in a customs warehouse, this is where you can store goods. As I said, with the inward processing relief, you can't store goods, you must be processing them and then declaring to customs whether they are for export or import or UK use. But with a customs warehouse, you store goods, but you can't process them. You can do what we call usual forms of handling. So that means that you can pack and unpack, check goods, relabel. There's a list of actually some very small list of procedures that you can carry out within a customs warehouse. They're called usual forms of handling. And there's no limit on the length of time that goods can be stored. So customs warehousing is much more useful to companies that are importing goods, storing them, and not knowing where they're going to be sold, whether they're going to be sold in the UK or re-exported, or when they might be sold. The goods can be stored duty-free in the meantime. So when goods come in to a customs warehouse, a very simplified frontier declaration is made, effectively just to say that these goods are going on to this customs warehouse. And the goods must then enter the customs warehouse physically within 5 days. stock count must be taken and customers informed if there is any difference between the information provided in that simplified frontier declaration, which might, for example, say, I'm importing 100 boxes of screws. Then when we find we're only importing 99, customers must be informed so that the frontier declaration can be amended. Then the goods are entered into the customs stock record. They're obviously entered into the business's own stock record, but there's additional information that needs to be kept for customs purposes, such as the import entry and date of the goods, things like the tariff classification and country of origin. They may already be in the normal stock system, but also the customs value must be kept. And obviously that's not data that would normally be in a stock control system. The type and quantity of the goods and any additional information must also be entered into the customs warehouse stock record, such as if the goods are subject to a preferential duty rate. The goods are then stored, but once the goods are coming out, either to the UK or for export, the declaration must be made to inform customs before the goods are removed. Obviously, if the goods are removed for export, then no duty is payable. But if they come into the UK, then a declaration to put the goods into free circulation must be made. And this is where the customs procedure code would come in, either 4071 000 to defer the import duty for goods coming into the UK, or CPC, Customs Procedure Code 3171 000 to export the goods. The customs stock record must then be updated to include the date and number of that declaration of the goods. And yeah, if goods are kept in the customs warehouse for a long time, and actually it's decided in the end that the goods can't be used for some reason, then goods may be destroyed without incurring a customs debt. It's of point to note that actually goods, I often find that goods do stay in a customs warehouse for a lot longer than people would like. And if that happens, it's often the case that when goods are removed, they're certainly not worth the value that was originally expected of them when they were imported. Particularly that's happened a lot, obviously, recently, because of COVID. Goods have not been sold as quickly as people expect. And for example, with fashion items, if the goods are sitting in a customs warehouse and haven't been sold and are now brought out of the customs warehouse, they may not be worth the same value at which they went in. Unfortunately, the duty is still due on the value of the goods when they were imported, but in special circumstances, HMRC may be willing to listen as if there is a good reason as to why the value has changed. They may allow you to bring the goods out at a reduced value, but that's not a definite. Now, for many people, to control the goods in the customs warehouse, and a customs warehouse approval is something that. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. A customs warehouse approval is a complex process to achieve, because effectively customs are giving you control of their border. You're allowed to have goods sitting in your premises on which duty and VAT has not been accounted for, and customs don't take that lightly, so they need to make sure that you have very good controls for making sure that the goods are properly accounted for to them. And often companies will find that a duty management system will help them do that, because it interfaces with their own stock control system to provide the information that HMRC would like. The duty management system is also particularly necessary if you are making fast releases from your customs warehouse. If you're importing tractors and you've got 6 tractors in your warehouse, I'm sure it's quite easy to account for each of those when they're removed. But if you are importing fast-moving items, perhaps you're importing large consignments of clothing and sending small packages out every day, then a duty management system will help you, because you will need simplified procedures approved by customs to help you with that. And that's back to that customs simplified import procedure, excuse me, I mentioned earlier. You would need CFSP to release the goods to customs. A duty management system, well, and using customs freight simplified procedures, as I've mentioned earlier, does help you reduce the cost of using agents for their clearance fees. And a duty management system can be, it's not a cheap piece of software to buy, but you must weigh it up against the reduced cost that you're going to save, the costs that you're going to save in those agents' fees. So a duty management system will report the daily activity and download it from your own stock control system into the duty management system. And then it will produce the supplementary declaration to remove the goods to free circulation. And then at the end of the month, again, it produces a final report by the 4th working day of each month, which is the final supplementary declaration required under the CFSP procedure, as mentioned earlier. So finally, today, I'm just going to quickly mention authorised economic operators, because we have a lot of questions about AEO, as it's called. In fact, all those applications for approval that I've spoken about this morning, in each case, they ask, do you have AEO approval? And a lot of people then say, well, what is AEO approval? So an authorised economic operator is effectively often referred to as a trusted trader. It's someone that HMRC has approved. It's where HMRC has looked at the systems and controls that a company operates and gives them effectively a gold star, an AEO approval. So you would need, there are 2 types of AEO. One is called AOC, which just refers to customs, and that you have a high standard of compliance regarding your import and export procedures, that you have good controls in place with agents and other third parties who are helping you with the import-export process, and that you have good systems for checking that everything is 100% when goods are declared, and that any errors are quickly identified and put right. So that's AEOC. Then we have AEOS. Now, AEOS is really the global AEO system. AEOC is just a system that operates within the EU, and the UK has continued to operate its own AEOC system since we've left the EU. But most countries have a full AEO, what we call AEOS system, which is really all about security and safety. It covers the customs compliance as well, but it's also about having good controls within your supply chain to show that there are no problems within the supply chain, and that there is adequate secure systems in place regarding the goods, the transport, the people within the company who are dealing with the goods. So it includes things like IT security, obviously premises security, and how businesses link together with their logistics companies. If you have an AEOS authorization, it is also recognised by countries overseas. The UK has what we call a mutual recognition of agreement with the EU. We also have it with Japan, China, and the USA. And the idea is that this should enable goods to move more quickly through the borders. We also should have one with Switzerland by the end of this year. So AEOS often particularly useful for logistics companies. So why would you want an AEO authorization? It does involve customs, as I say, doing a very thorough audit of your business and every area of your business. And people ask what the benefits of AEO are. Often people apply because there is pressure from customers or suppliers. We're seeing that in certain supply chains, such as the car industry, and actually some supermarkets require their suppliers to be AEO authorised. It of course reduces supply chain risks and costs and improves business efficiency because it makes you look at your business inside out, and brings lots of business improvements with it. For people who have a large deferment account, that's over £10,000 a month, if they have an AEO authorisation, it can give them a waiver, or a reduced, sorry, not a full waiver, but part waiver on the cost of the bank guarantee that's required for a large deferment account. And also it enables the use of certain customs facilitations. Unfortunately, there's not a great number, but in fact, I can only think of one that's relevant to today, which is that entry in declarants records for customs warehousing. So if you were using a customs warehouse and you needed that fast release of goods from the customs warehouse, you would want to apply for entry in declarants records, which would enable you to put the goods into your own records, which would be your normal stock records, and only report to customs after the goods had been removed, rather than before the goods had been removed. So for that, you would need to be an AEO trader, because customs are allowing you to take goods out of a customs warehouse before you let them know that the goods have left. And of course, there is a risk there to the whole border security. So you would have to be an AEO trader. So I've talked for too long, actually. And are there any questions that...
Yes, there are, Barbara. The first one, we order an item from Germany, from a German company, and use DHL for delivery. Is DHL declaring the import? So do we need to do anything or not?
I think you're going to have to ask DHL that question. DHL undoubtedly are declaring the import. They're a reputable company and they've been doing fast parcel clearance for many years, and they know the procedures for bringing the goods into the country. They should be able to give you a copy of your import declaration. I'm sure they will have declared the goods for you.
Fantastic. And this is about outward processing. Once you have imported your items, once you've reported your items you initially exported under outward processing, to close the loop, do you just complete the BOD4 online? Where does the C&E 1154 fit in?
Yes, the C&E 1154 isn't generally required. It will be in your authorization if it is required. It's specifically required, I think, for certain like food business definitely will require it, but generally it's not required.
Fantastic. Also, a few people have asked, how long, if you get an IPR or an OPR authorization, is there a specific time period that they last for?
They last for 5 years.
5 years.
Or 5 years. When you apply for 5 years less 1 day, because that's unless again you're in a specific industry such as food industry, then it will be less.
Fantastic. Also, somebody's asked, do the inward processing and OPR processing arrangements, procedures, do they change from country to country, or are they pretty similar all around?
They will change from country to country. As far as the UK and the EU are concerned, though, we operate the same procedure. The UK has taken the procedure that we had under the EU, under the union legislation, and we've just implemented that into the UK, and we haven't changed anything. So it would be exactly the same in Europe, but could be different in other countries.
For some reason. Customs warehousing, is it mainly used for B2B or a lot of the B2C? I mean, obviously you mentioned the retailers, so I'm presuming if someone's doing e-commerce or something like that, could they use a customs warehousing?
Yes, you can use it for B2C as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. Malin, there's a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want to ask those?
Yes. So is there a good tool other than the Excel spreadsheet to manage the processes and used to report quarterly returns on import IPR back to HMRC? How is the best way to do it?
Yes. So when you report to HMRC, you can complete the bill of discharge or provide your own schedule to HMRC. They have got a draft spreadsheet that is a formula that you could use. I'm not aware of any other availability because basically it should be taken from your own records and then onto something like an Excel spreadsheet in the format that HMRC will provide.
Thank you. We've got another one about goods coming back from European Union for repairs. So the UK is the manufacturer selling the goods to European Union and the customer is returning them for repair. So is IPR the best option?
IPR would be the best option for those goods. However, you may be able to also use returned goods relief. If they were your goods that were originally sent out, then they may be able to come back under returned goods relief, which would avoid you having to get a full IPR approval from HMRC. Returned goods relief is only available for goods returning within 3 years. So if it was more than 3 years old, you would have to use IPR.
I'd like to complete, because the question was asking about the free trade agreement between United Kingdom and European Union. If your goods are United Kingdom preferential origin when they are imported into European Union, so you cannot beneficiate of preferential origin when you are returning the goods. So this won't help. It's either IPR, like Barbara said, or RGR, return goods relief. Those are from the chat. And do you have an extra question?
Yes, I have another question. Somebody just quickly asked any comments on how the possible new free trade zones will help.
Oh, yes. Well, to be honest, I don't think that they will help particularly at all, because the customs procedures are going to be the same in the free trade zones as they are outside the free trade zones. There's not going to be any additional facilitations as far as customs are concerned. There might be, you know, there could be some tweaks, but only on the basis of it might be easier to get some approvals. You might not have to be AEO, but we don't know that at the moment. But customs have said that no, they facilitate trade as much as they can, and they can't see that they can do anything further within a free zone.
So and obviously they're going to take time to develop them anyway. So it's not a quick fix to anything at this point in time.
No, although, you know, we're supposed to have them by the end of the year.
Time will tell. Time will tell. So thank you, Barbara. Comprehensive overview of customs procedures and some of the simplifications as ever. Thank you very much. I'm just going to just say a bit more about some of the things the Chamber are involved in on this line. So Malin, if you could just bring up the presentation, that would be great. Just a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the Chamber's information. Is it going to happen? Okay, let's see if I've got it open. So hopefully I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Is that correct? Can you see my screen? So I just wanted to say a little bit about some of the events that are coming up from the Chamber in the next few weeks, couple of weeks actually. So next week with the BCC Global Annual Conference is taking place. They've got some of the big hitters, I think, from government and outside of government. So please look at that. It's a free online event. You can dip in and dip out, whatever suits. And then we have another event on the 17th, which covers key steps to internationalizing your website. But one of particular interest for you guys that are involved in the customs and supply chains, etc., is the 29th of June, where we have a VAT triangulation post UK exit from the EU. So please do try to attend. We have our VAT expert who's going to talk through that. He has a nickname for it, so it might be worth tuning in, because triangulation, it can be troublesome, let's say. And the next thing I'm going to say, obviously Barbara mentioned the customs simplified procedures and everything. The Chambers of Commerce are customs brokers, so we can do declarations for you. We can do simplified declarations, we can do supplementary declarations, and we can also provide extensive training on customs entries, etc. But also we will give advice and answer to any questions. And if we can't ask themselves, we obviously ask experts like Barbara, who have great expertise in this field. But I would just say, please pop along to our website, have a look at some of the courses, either through the Chamber Customs courses or also the accredited other international trade courses that we deliver. So please have a look, come to us if you want a quote. We will be sending out this presentation after today, so please, you'll be getting an email with it in. So please, you don't need to write too many, hopefully too many notes on top of what you had, because Barbara's presentation was very comprehensive. So I'd just like to thank you all for joining today, and wish you all have a good Friday and a hopeful weekend. My contact details are there, but do contact the team. We have a large team here at the Chamber involved in trade. So if there's any questions about trading with the EU, trading with non-EU markets, please do give us a call. Thank you very much and have a good weekend. Thank you.